Fantastic. So we'll get started. We should be seeing a few more people popping in. You've got the option to message in the chat if you've got a question for our Q&A at the end. Please send a message to Lola Q&A. We'll be messaging you throughout as well. You can see her details. Message to her. We will get time at the end to cover everything. If we don't, we will also be sending out an email following this to everyone on our mailing list with any follow-up. And you'll also see the webinar will be popping up on our YouTube channel, where we've also got details of our previous webinar. We've got a few sessions today. They're all about roadmap success for the 11+. We'll be starting with my colleague Kerry Moss. So I'm going to just bring her up to the stage here, and she will talk you through our first session. Bring her up.
Yeah. Well, I'm just getting my screens in order, but while I do that, it's great to have people joining us today. I'm Kerry Moss. I've been working with students, helping them on the road to success for 11+, 13+, and other forms of entrance exams for well, quite a few years now. And I want to start off today talking about logistics of applications. Where should you be at? What is the overall timeline like? And things like that. So, here are some things that you may have already done if you have a child who's currently in year 5. And if you haven't already done these things, then I recommend you look into them now. Again, this is for parents with children who are currently in year 5. If your children are younger, then you've got a year or so before you absolutely need to think about these things. But it's good to know the things that you need to keep in mind. So, first of all, thinking about the area where you're going to be looking for schools. So maybe that's where you currently live, or maybe you plan to move into a certain area to get into what's known as the catchment for schools. So that's the geographical area where they accept students from. And you've got to bear in mind that schools will often consider the address that you live at when you apply, rather than plan to buy a house in Trafford so we can go to a Trafford grammar school. If you don't currently live in Trafford, then they can't do anything. Another thing to think about is the type of school that's best for your child. So thinking about things like, do you think you prefer a single-sex school or a co-educational school with mixed genders? Have you thought about the curriculum? Does the school offer specialist subjects? And even things like, what are the school's post-16 options? So that's, do they offer IB after GCSEs? Do they offer A-levels? Or do they even have a sixth form college that offers post-16 options? Or will your child then have to move once they get to the end of year 11 after their GCSEs? So there are things to keep in mind when you're looking at school options, as well as specialist support for things like dyslexia, ADHD, or if your child speaks English as an additional language. Different schools are equipped differently for these things and will be able to talk to you about them. Another thing to think about is the academic level or emphasis. So even though we're talking about academically selective schools today, some schools will place more emphasis on academics to push high results. So that's something else. So another thing to consider is, have you done your research on specific schools? So you've thought about the type of school you'd like your child to go to, but specific schools in your area, or if you're looking potentially at boarding options, then out of area. When you're looking at options, I would always advise that you look at both selective and non-selective options. So we're going to talk mostly about selective schools. Those are ones you have to do an entrance exam for. But having a non-selective option in mind in your back pocket that you and your child would both be happy with as like a plan B or plan C if they don't pass the entrance exam, or if the competition is very high that year and they aren't successful in getting a place. It saves stress and tears later down the road. So that would be my advice. And finally, have you attended any open days at school that you're considering to get like a real life feel? Often these are held in the autumn term, so many schools will have held them in sort of September, October of the end of last year. But schools also often have opportunities throughout the year. And if you haven't been able to visit, you can always contact a school and see if they're offering tours or if you're able to come in to have a look around. So thinking about the logistics for the 11 plus for grammar schools, registration for the 11 plus exams open for most schools in between March and May, mostly April and May, but a couple in March, and that's of year 5. I always recommend check your area and your specific schools because they will have the specific information for you. You'll need to check and see if you only need to apply once to what's called a consortium of schools, meaning a group of schools that have a shared 11 plus test, or whether you need to apply directly to each school. So for example, in Trafford, there is the Trafford Consortium of Grammar Schools, which is a group of schools, and you can apply and you take one 11 plus test, and you can use that result for any of the schools in that group. But in other areas like Essex, there are different exam boards and different test providers for the 11 plus, meaning you have to look carefully at the school that you're looking at, you're aiming for, to see whether you need to apply to different tests. Registration deadlines are between June and September. So that's of this year if your child's in year 5. Most of them close July, August. I've only seen a couple that are as late as September, so don't leave it too late. A couple of exceptions if you're in the Lincolnshire area, and they have early registration, it's already open. Tiffin School and Tiffin Girls School, if you're in the Surrey area, they have a later process, as does Kent, and that doesn't open for registration until June. Exam dates, that's the next thing. Almost all 11 plus grammar school exams are in September of year 6. They happen right at the beginning of year 6. There are a couple of exceptions, but almost all of them are in September of year 6. Check your target school's information. They may already have the date for you. If not a specific date, then they will be able to tell you generally when it will be. Results. Most schools will provide you with results in the October prior to the secondary school common application deadline, which is on the 31st of October. And that's the deadline by which you need to submit your preferences for secondary school places, for state school places, this is. Preferences aren't guaranteed, but you must submit this form on time to avoid being given a random test. As we talked about in our December 11 plus webinar, which will shortly be available on our YouTube, passing an 11 plus test unfortunately does not guarantee your child a place at their top choice school because there's a lot of competition and other factors come into it like catchment, how close you live to the school, things like this. So another thing to just bear in mind. Offers of places for state schools, including state grammar schools, are given in early March. You're offered a place at one school, which you need to accept by a given deadline. There's also an appeal process. Secondary school applications in general are quite the complex topic. So if you have more questions about that, or you'd be interested in a webinar in the future, let us know in the chat and we can get that arranged. Things are a little bit different for independent schools. Registration, open dates and deadlines are not standardised. And so my best advice is look up the schools that you are targeting and applying to, and consult their admissions information. Many registrations fall between sort of September and November in year 6. So it's a much later process than for state grammar schools. But again, look it up. Don't get caught short. Independent test dates range widely. Many of them happen in the January of year 6. But I also know schools who hold pre-tests in the September, which are like a first round test, often in like verbal and non-verbal reasoning, which a child has to pass to then move on to the next stage, which is often an English and maths based test in the January or the February. This is a little bit different to pre-tests for 13 plus entry, if you know about that. Again, if you'd like more information about independent school entry and different entry points, let us know in the chat and we can send you over some resources. If you're applying from overseas or your child speaks English as an additional language, it's possible that the school will request additional information or an additional English language assessment. There's also separate assessment processes for scholarships. Independent schools may also have an interview stage. Consult your school's website. And results are often given alongside allocations, and every school has its own timeline for this. It's different to state school place offers when everybody gets their offer on the same day. Independent schools, they can each make their own decisions about when that happens. So those are the logistics. And then in terms of academics, where should you be up to now? If you have a child who's currently in year 5, who's aspiring to 11 plus grammar or 11 plus independent entry, you should already know where your child's school teacher thinks they are up to academically. Have had a parents' evening meeting or read a recent school report that tells you what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are. The teacher might also be able to give you an indication of how ready your child is to take entrance exams, although not all schools will give advice on this. Something else, you should already have become some kind of 11 plus academic preparation. For best outcomes, we always advise long-term preparation starting as early as year 3, but it's not too late to start now if you haven't. For example, we have a week-long intensive course over February half term that has some limited spaces available if your child's looking for a kickstart in their preparations. And we're going to have some more tips for ways to prepare as we move on in the webinar. And finally, you should have routines in place to encourage regular and ideally daily reading to expand the vocabulary, creativity, and grammar knowledge, as well as some other regular practice for maths or verbal and non-verbal reasoning. Okay, so I'm going to pass back to Willow, who's going to take over with the next section of the webinar.
Thank you very much, Kerry. So hopefully that has got everyone's brains alive and thinking of all the things you've already organised. If anything in that sounded alarming, new to you, like something you should have been doing a while ago, please do get in touch. There's plenty we can do to help you. Lola has helpfully put something in the chat for you, which gives you a link to a consultation with us. We've got some questions coming into the Q&A. Lola will be adding those as well. If you want to message directly through Lola Q&A, she will put those in a list for us, and Kerry and I will be dealing with those at the end. We will also be going through now 3 topics that are about active preparation and how you can be helping your child in the most productive way in the last few months if you're already in year 5 or in the next couple of years. So I'm going to talk to you about the next session, which I'll just give a moment to come up on my screen. It's called Making Practice at Home Effective. After that, we've got another session from Kerry about how to give feedback, and then a session on mock exams before our Q&A. So hopefully we can all see this on the screen. I'm just going to talk to you now about some practical tips. Okay, so we've got 5 subtopics we're going to talk about: modeling skills, personalizing, a variety of tasks, wider practice, and fun activities. One important thing that I think is very hard to really see about kids at this age is where they're actually at with their exam skills. Often students who are very bright and able on tests, we can picture them as sort of mini adults. They can seem really mature at this age. But I have been teaching for over 12 years now, I think, and it can be really hard to see exactly where a student's struggling, and often it is just that they don't have the exam skills we expect. So what is incredibly helpful for students at this age, they're old enough to understand things, they're old enough to learn new skills, but they're still not quite ready enough to have all the skills that we have, is if you can model for them how you actually approach a test, how you actually learn. That's one of the best things I think about the 11 plus exams. Even if your kid has not necessarily got their heart set on a grammar school or independent school, it's a great set of exams just to start learning exam skills. And learning from a parent is a really great way to do it. So see if you can model things like the way that you solve problems. That might be around the house, so maybe you're doing some DIY and you're just going to talk out loud as you fix the problem, as you figure out what the problem is. It could be that you're learning something yourself. Maybe you're doing a bit of Duolingo and you hit a problem with some French grammar. Talk through the process of how you figure out your next steps. The same for persistence. When we're stuck on something, as adults, we have a lot of tools in our arsenal for how to get past that. And we shortcut it and we don't really articulate what it is. But it's great to be able to just express that. So let's look at exam strategy, for example. When I have
Sorry, Willow,
off,
can we, is it possible for you to increase your volume slightly? Thank you.
yes, I am sure I can. Just see if I can do it on my end. Maybe my microphone has gone a bit quiet. If I've got something on mind, I can change.
I think speaking up would help, and then we'd be fine.
Yes, I can. I am already talking very loudly, so do let me know if you miss anything. And let me pop this back in. There we go. So yes, just showing someone how you do your exam skills. So when I have students with me, I will often do an exam alongside them. I might even do the first 5 minutes beforehand and just talk through how I perform that. So if I'm looking at a paper, for example, say it was a math paper, I would look at it and say, I know I've got 10 minutes for this. I can see there's 3 here, a topic I don't like. I'm going to circle those so I've got time to come back to them. I can see there's 5 questions on fractions, which I know can be sometimes tricky. I'm going to underline all the question words, circle the numbers on top and bottom. I can see also I don't quite have enough time, so I'm going to make a note that I want to be halfway through by 10 minutes. And I will just verbalize that and really give students a chance to see how I make those decisions. One other thing that is also great is just swapping roles. So letting them be the teacher and try and teach you something. And that might be something as fun as a video game, but it might also be a pretty standard thing. Like say they've learned some maths at school. That is that new math that you've never heard of, that you didn't do in your day. See if they can teach you about it and model being a good student. So model good learning. Ask questions when you don't understand something and say, can you explain this thing to me? And just modeling those things is something that will teach them skills you take for granted. And the best thing about you being able to be helping them prepare at home is that you can really personalize the work that you're doing with them. We often hear things about 11 class preparation on the grapevine from other parents. We might find information online. You might go to other webinars like this and people are telling you it has to be following this method. That's not going to work for every child, and you know your child. You need to find the best combination of things that work for them. So here's a variety of things that I might be picking between if I'm helping a child. For example, spaced repetition, which is something we do today. We do it in 2 days, we do it in a week, we do it in 3 months, and it keeps coming at a set interval. You can find websites that help with this. So for example, if you're trying to learn vocabulary, vocabulary.com has a spaced repetition engine, and it knows the words that you know and don't know, and it keeps bringing them back up again. And you might think, that really is going to work for my child who seems to know something one day and then forget it quite quickly. I want some tools that work on spaced repetition with them. Or they love the gamified aspect. There are lots of other vocabulary games and math games. A favorite of our students is called Free Write, which is run by the UN. And every answer you get correct, the UN donates rice to people around the world. And you can see how much rice you're donating, and you can pick different levels. It responds to you and knows what levels you are. Find the activities and know if your kid would really respond to gamified learning. And they might respond to competitions just in the household. So when I was in high school, I changed schools and we had a new language to learn. I had previously been to school that did French, and my new school did German, and I'm not very good at languages, but I am quite competitive, which my dad knew. So he also learned German, and we had a competition for our GCSE results, and you'll be happy to know I won. But that wouldn't work for everybody. Some kids find that really intimidating and they would find that an unpleasant way of encouragement. I didn't. I really loved it. I liked that my dad took so much time and effort to really invest in following the same education that I did. Some kids we know, they learn from videos much better than they do in person, and they're so used to learning things on YouTube these days. There are lots of instructional videos. This is especially helpful if there are topics in 11 plus that you are not very confident with. For example, non-verbal reasoning isn't something we ever really do day to day, and you might have really rusty with it, you might never been good at it. There's lots of videos on YouTube you can put on, you can try and learn together, you can have a competition, you can gamify it, you can combine things here. Other things when we're looking, so Kerry mentioned reading books as a strategy for long-term skills. Even though we're only 8 months away from the exams, we might think that's not a long time. It's long enough to get bored, so we don't want to be doing the same things again and again. I'll be talking about variety in a minute, but there's still a great benefit to reading books, doing anything to encourage a bit more interest in vocabulary. And the last one here is just discussing mistakes. And I've put this one on here as a good example of some kids absolutely will just shut down if you try and talk about their mistakes with them. And you will have that sitting at the kitchen table, frustrated experience. And you know that if you put them in a tuition class with a teacher who would only be able to articulate, through conversation, their mistakes, it wouldn't work. But in your household, you might say, great, we're going to make a game out of it. We're going to watch some instruction videos. But you might have a kid who really responds to stuff. So you're going to know them best and what the best mix of things is. And do not think there is one right way to repair. There absolutely isn't. This is a chance for you to help them figure out their best way to learn. As I mentioned, variety is very important. There's a lot of variety around this for preparation. So there's different types of exams, grammar and independent. There's different things in all those exams. So there's different skills such as verbal reading, non-verbal reading, maths, comprehension, writing. And students can be good at different things at different levels in my classes, and they can be good at different things at different levels from month to month. At this age, you get a lot of breakthrough and then backsliding, and you really want to make sure you're building variety into their preparation to account for that and allow yourself to increase preparation in some things, decrease it in others. And a big thing with the 11 plus is enthusiasm is hard to maintain for months on end. If you're doing practice papers over and over again for 8 months, you will reach a stage where they just won't want to keep building the skills that they're not strong at. So finding a way to build variety in is absolutely important. There's also a variety of issues that you might be kind of hitting a wall with, so just being aware of. Like we said, some people have a natural aptitude for different subjects. They might be differently aware of things. So they might be strong at maths at year 5 level, but actually the 11 plus tests into year 6 even before they've started it. You can make sure you're giving very varied preparation for it. And also one of the issues might just be timing. They might be absolutely fantastic at the test when given all the time they want and not able to narrow it down. You need to do some work just on timing itself. Lots of different types of practice you can do, mixing short and long-term plans, and really building variety as much as you can to avoid burnout. There's not just skills practice for the test, as I said, you want to have wider practice to keep up interest. So things that we might be thinking of as exam skills that are not just exam topics, I really want to just put a little focus on is building resilience. It's a difficult time taking these exams. It's also quite difficult to face failure and can really be the first time in which you're asked to do something quite high stake at this age. And kind of anything that we can do at this age to be building more resilience is great. So try some new sports, try new activities that will mean that by the time the test comes around, resilience is really built up. We also want to increase focus. The tests are long, the preparation is long, try new puzzles, try new games to build that up. Strengthening vocabulary through reading classics is absolutely essential, and we can bring in day-to-day life some mental tips. I've got a long list on the next page of various things we can be doing to bring in test skills into all of our areas of our life. So do take a look through these. Feel free to grab a screenshot. As some examples, if you've got a child who's just not particularly strong on non-verbal reasoning, which I absolutely wasn't when I took the test at this age, you know, everyone has 4 skills at different levels. You can do things to make it fun, like origami, like Lego, like spot the difference games. You don't have to sit there at the kitchen table staring at little boxes with different puzzles in them, feeling frustrated. You can find ways to make it fun. I think things to look at from the English test, for example, a way to make it fun. We want comprehension skills to be built up. That does not just come from sitting reading classics. It comes from predicting the rest of the film, from telling your own stories as a group, from picking new vocabulary and incorporating a story. So lots of different activities we can be doing here and lots of ways to make the preparation fun. I'm going to pass back over to Kerry now, who's doing our next session, which is about how to give feedback.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I was mid screen sharing and I forgot to unmute. But here we go. So it's one thing to be doing all the practice and supporting your child at home, but it's a completely different thing to know how to give them feedback, how to mark their work in a way that feels useful and effective. So that's what this section is going to be looking at. So marking's important. There's no point in your child doing 11+ practice if it's not going to be marked in some way, if they're not going to find out what they got right, what they got wrong, and why, and then they can learn and improve from there. But I'm going to advocate today for more than just ticking and crossing. Because if we look at this example on the screen, the ticks and crosses, what has the child, why is it incorrect? Why is 46 correct, but the others are all incorrect? And can they find the correct answer now that they know that the one they initially chose was wrong? What skills and knowledge are they missing? I'm looking at this as a teacher and I'm thinking, this is a student who maybe understands, in theory, alphabetical order. They know the alphabet, but maybe they don't have the skills of knowing how to put things in alphabetical order when the first 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 letters are the same. That's a hard skill. And if they don't understand those things, then are they going to make the same mistakes again? And if they're going to make the same mistakes again, then they're not learning. So let's have a look at some strategies that you can use at home to help them with this. So the first one being, I think, one of the most productive, and it's the same sort of strategy that I would use as a tutor in a session with students. And that's co-marking and talking it through. And it's really helpful, and I'm sure you will find it in your own personal and professional lives, that when you have a problem to work out, it's often a lot easier to get to the end point when you have somebody to bounce ideas off and reason through explanations. And having a collaborative effort with your child helps them to see that you're invested in this as well. It's not just them nose to the paper, working really hard to get to somewhere. They can see that you're invested, you're involved, and you want to see them succeed and learn. This sort of marking, it fosters knowledge growth as well as confidence building. So some tips for how you might work through this, and you can see those on the side. And I'm actually going to ask Willow to help me role play this. So in this situation, we imagine that Willow is my student or my child who has completed this question, this non-verbal reasoning question, and has chosen answer D, but it's incorrect. I've marked it wrong. That's not what it says in the answer book. So I'll probably start out by saying, right, I'm not the best at non-verbal reasoning. It's never been my favourite, and I'm not an expert. But I think if we work together, we can work it out. So let's go back to basics and check the question. What do we have to do for this question? Can you tell me, Willow, what do we have to do to answer this question?
Yeah, this is an analogy question. So we have to match the pattern that moves from the top left to the top right. That same pattern of movements has to be in the bottom left to the empty space in the bottom right.
Right, exactly. And when we're doing non-verbal reasoning questions like this, what's a really, do you know any helpful tricks to help you remember things to look out for?
Yes, I don't like non-verbal reasoning either. So I have learned a tool that I use called SNAPS.
Okay, and what does SNAPS stand for? Do we remember?
It tells you what to look for when you're trying to understand how the shapes have changed. So you have to look at shape, number, angle, position, shading, and size.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I think that sounds like it's correct. Okay, so we've recapped the core skills, and now let's look and work through it step by step. So if we look at the sort of question pair that we're given at the top, tell me what's changing from the first one to the second one?
Well, I think it looks all right. So I think the top bit is correct. In the top left, there's a triangle and a boat. The triangle's small, the boat's big, and then it swaps to the triangle's big and the boat's small.
Okay, so you're saying it's
They
correct
shift
because
it.
you've done what?
Yeah, so I found small dot goes to big dot, big boat goes to small boat, and they're the same color, just like they are in the top.
Okay, so you're right that we have that in D. Do we have that in any of the other answer options?
Yes, A and C, the same.
Okay, so that means we can rule out which one?
B is not correct.
Good, we can rule out B. We know it's definitely not B because we've looked at how this changes. Okay, what's something else that changes in the question set?
Then just below that, there's a little yellow triangle, and that stays yellow, but it moves all the way to the side.
Mhm.
So it doesn't change color. It doesn't change anything else. It just moves. So it can't be D because that changes color, but it can still be D.
Mm-hmm.
Could be
Okay.
A.
What else changes in the question set?
The bottom left boat becomes small. Everything else stays the same on that. So A and D still the same. And then
Yeah.
two small triangles stay the same color but get bigger. A and D could still be correct.
Yeah.
And then the bottom right, the boat turns upside down and it's upside down in D. Oh, but it started upside down, so it has to switch. So A is correct.
Yeah, exactly. You were 90% of the way there, but the question tricked you at the final step.
Mm.
So there we go. An example of how we might work through it together using step by step. And if we still found that difficult, what we could do is we could look at the answer together and go, right, well, if A is the answer, let's work backwards from there. Let's compare A to B to C to D, what's different in the answer options, and find the answer that way. If it's not possible for you to have to have an adult sit with your child to co-mark, then independent critical marking is something that your child can do. I will say that this takes a lot of diligence, self-motivation, attention, focus, all of those skills that Willow was talking about before. And it's really hard for a child of any age, but particularly at this age, to consistently do this. Particularly when what they're doing is analysing and looking at things that they've got wrong. But if you want to give this a go, occasionally mix it in with some co-marking. These are the steps that I would advise your child takes. So first of all, complete the test or the exercise, whether it's timed or untimed. And then afterwards, just look over their answers and just feel like, okay, am I happy with these? And put like a little star or a marker next to any that they're unsure of. Like, oh, I just guessed this one, I didn't know. Next, then they should look at the mark scheme, which most exercises, textbooks, etc. will come with one with the answers. And they should just mark the answers tick or cross. Now, ideally, they'll be doing this really quickly, not paying too much attention to what the correct answers actually are. And if you have an adult or a sibling who's available to do that ticking and crossing bit, that's even better. Third step, look again at the questions that they've got wrong, and they should have a go and see if they can self-correct. So now I know it's not D, can I work out the answer from A, B, and C? And then final step, if they're still having problems, still getting something incorrect, they should look carefully at the correct answer at the mark scheme and try to reason out for themselves why that's the correct answer and go through the steps by themselves that I just did with Willow. They might need to look up word definitions or check calculations with a calculator to help them do this. The final tool that you can use to help your child is to use AI. And I was trying to think, because I know that there's sometimes a bit of hesitancy around using AI, particularly with kids and in education. And I think a bit of hesitancy is okay. But also, when we have tools that are available that can help, and with parental supervision, I think it's worth considering. So these are a couple of examples of how I might use openly, freely available AI tools to help you be a bit more of an expert when you're helping your child mark their work. So to give you an example here, the question at the top left, find the next two numbers in the following sequences. So 3, 7, 11, 15, 19, and we've got to fill the gaps. Now, imagine your child's filled in the answers and they've got it wrong. And you want to be able to help them to work out why it's wrong and how to work out the correct answer. What I've just done is I've used Gemini at Google, and I've put in that this question is from a maths test paper for 10-year-olds. You could put from 11 plus paper. Can you explain to me what the correct answer is and why? And Gemini's told me the correct answers are 23 and 27 and explained the steps that you have to take to get there. So it's telling me what the sequence is and the calculations that I would have to do to get to the correct answer. So that's an example where it works perfectly, very smoothly, but something a bit more complex. We've got a table here with train times and gaps in the train times, and there are a series of questions we have to answer. And the first one that we're looking at is how many minutes does it take to travel between Edinburgh and Kilcardy? So imagine your child's completely stumped, they've guessed, or they've put an answer in, but they've got it wrong. What I did here is the same prompt. I said, here's a maths question. Can I have the answer and an explanation of why? And then I just copied and pasted all the information and put it in. And Gemini told me that it would take 1 hour and 33 minutes. But if we look carefully, it's pulling incorrect information from the question because the formatting has disappeared when I've copied and pasted. So that's where you as an adult need to step in and use common sense for a minute and go, oh, wait, no, that's not correct. Or involve your child in this and say, oh, do you think Google's got it correct? Or do we think that we need to correct it here? So then I corrected it. I said, can I correct you? The train departs Edinburgh at 13:43 and arrives at 14:18. And then Gemini realizes its mistake, gives me the calculation, 35 minutes. To give you another example and using a different tool, you can, this one using OpenAI or ChatGPT for a verbal reasoning question. This is a series question. I honestly, I love verbal reasoning, but I hate these questions. I find them so difficult, even still now. And I always have to think really carefully when I'm teaching them, which just shows that teachers aren't flawless. But I've done the same thing. I've copied the question in and I've said this is from a verbal reasoning test. Give me the correct answer and explain why. And I will say, ChatGPT, I quite like the way it's laid it out. It's giving me step 1, step 2, step 3, and given me the answer. And it's really clear and straightforward to follow. And using AI would also be useful for verbal reasoning questions where you have to group words or find the odd one out. It might not be able to give you exactly the correct answer, but it might help your child to think about, okay, well, different alternative meanings of words. And okay, well, why would, ChatGPT group these words together? What's the connection I can see? So even if it's not going to help you get to the absolute correct answer, it's going to help you a bit with the method, and it's going to help you to have critical conversations about these questions with your child that are going to help them to learn. So I'm going to pass back to Willow for the next section.
Okay, we're just heading into our last session now. I know we've gone through lots of things very quickly. We want to give you a real overview of everything, but as you've seen in the chat, there is an option to book in a one-on-one session with either myself or Kerry to talk through any specific questions you have. And do feel free to submit questions to Lola, who's in the chat as Lola Q&A, and we'll also talk about them at the end of the session as well. So the last part I'm going to talk to you about is either everyone's favorite or least favorite topic. It's mock papers. And these can be very useful, but sometimes the tricky part is they can be very hard to find. So we'll talk through all the issues around them and how we want to make sure we're making the best use of any mock papers. So we've got 4 things to talk about. The first one is which exam. So as we talked about today, 11+ can mean grammar school or independent school, and those come at quite different times. And one thing that can be tricky is because grammar schools are usually first, they are early, they often have quite consistent papers. So a whole consortium in an area might all use the same paper, or a school might use the same board paper every year for all time. Past papers are usually available, but not all. So because of that, it's often a bit hard. It's a bit easier to prepare for that. So we might just spend a lot of time focusing on that and think we'll deal with independent school skills later. However, they are a mix of dates. So even though they tend to be later, they can be early. There's also quite a lot of variety in them. So you might find in your area, they'll have extra English paper, they might have a writing skills section, and the school might provide no samples, no reference samples, or they might deliberately change their paper every year as a way to avoid being able to prepare for it. And it will likely include slightly harder skills like English reading and writing, which just take longer to practice and prepare. You can't just do, a crash course in a couple of weeks and think you've got everything. So we really need to make sure that we are creating a timeline thinking, I know I've got the grammar school test first, but I want to make sure I'm prepared in the long term for independent school as well. How am I building all these skills together? One, as I mentioned, hard thing can be that it's tricky to find past papers. So Kerry and I, often when we're dealing with students applying to schools, we'll spend quite a bit of time looking for it. And it is just a matter often of very thorough searching. So we get quite used to, in our day-to-day lives, just looking on the first page of Google, finding the answer. But if you're looking for a specific school's past paper, you might have to dig quite deeply and spend some time thinking carefully about your search terms, maybe looking on some forums, such as Mumsnet, for some clues in the right direction. And it might be that you can't find a past paper, but you can find a lot of information about them from other parents like you who have been mystified by what it's going to contain. And they might say, oh, the first part's like the one from this school, the second part's like the one from this school. You can put together an example that's basically like it. As I mentioned, Kerry and I spend a lot of time looking for past papers. You will find that the local tutors in your area will also have a list of, a pack of probably past papers from your local schools, and ask other parents. But make sure that you're at least putting some time into this, even if it seems at first like it's hopeless. You can almost always find something. Kerry and I will attest to that. There is usually some information out there. But you might not have what you consider to be a great supply of good past papers, and it's important that you are helping your child prepare for an exam that they can't have seen examples of. And that's a skill in itself. That is a really helpful skill to give them the so things that you can be teaching them is just focus more on the exam skills. So show them how you evaluate a paper, how when you sit down and you've got an hour, hour and a half, how do you judge how to split the timings? How do you judge where to spend your time? Can they adapt their time? So say they look at a paper and they think, this looks like it would take me half an hour, but they've only got 20 minutes. Help them judge how to cut that down and think, what am I going to, skip here? Where am I going to have to speed through some things? Make sure they're exposed to lots of different types of tests so that they understand and are able to respond quite quickly to new things. And really, really, when you get students working on things like this, unfamiliar tests, where they tend to lose a lot of marks is they are making assumptions and they are not reading questions carefully enough. They are not checking their marks carefully enough, checking their answers. When they're in a test and they think they recognize something and they just speed through it, they could lose every single mark because they've not followed the instructions of the questions. So really make sure when they're having to do with something unfamiliar, they are used to responding to that properly and they know how to handle mistakes. That if they get halfway through a paper and they realize I've misunderstood something quite fundamental, how do they respond to that? Give them training experience on that, and that will really serve them well. If you do have papers though, that is also really helpful, but we want to make sure they're still practicing exam skills. So practicing time allocation, it is something personal to them. As I mentioned, I was not good at non-verbal reasoning at my level plus, but that meant I had extra time because I was very good at other parts of the paper and could spend a bit more time on the non-verbal reasoning. Even when the other kids in the room that I was in were speeding through that, I knew what I needed to spend my time on to get the marks I needed. You could play games to keep these mock papers interesting. So you can maybe play games and say, okay, we're going to do it together and I will allocate you 10 minutes on this and I'll see if I can beat you in 5 minutes. We want to keep past papers exciting. You can also give them targeted double points. So if you know they are bad at fractions, for example, you can give them double points for every fractions question and they can choose the topic for you to get half points on if you're going to compete. You want to keep past papers exciting, as I've mentioned. You've got many months before the actual exams. I quite like doing physical movements between sections. So we might do math in one room and then you have to race to the other side of the house and do your English paper, then race upstairs, do the non-verbal and run around a bit, maybe even physically move around different questions. Make it active. It brings the speed of the test to life. I also really like having students do quizzes and questions backwards. So start and then go forwards so they can figure out where do I want to spend my time rather than just starting at the beginning, getting halfway through the time and then realizing I've done a quarter of the paper, having to reevaluate that and look at it new. One thing that I think is useful as you get closer to the exam is having a skip allowance. Related to time balancing, you might find that a student is particularly bad at certain sort of questions. So the ones that Kerry showed before that are the alphabet sequence questions, they are so time consuming. You have to write out your whole alphabet yourself, figure out where the divide is, count things along. They're sometimes not worth the time. If you are weak on them, you might think, actually, I'm going to lose 5 minutes on these for 3 points. Not worth it. So you could help your child develop the exam skill to know where it's not worth spending. They get to the end of the exam and they've got time, they can go back to those. While you're kind of making it fun, playing around with the test papers at home, you can put in skip allowances and say, you don't have to do those and you'll still get all the points for them. And then I put in one sort of game. It's not really a fun game if you're a grown up, but kids will find it fun. Do something physical to mix up the exam practice. So like I was saying, 8 months is a long time. You really struggle with burnout as you get closer to doing lots of tests. You want to figure out what problems your child is losing points on. As you get closer, it's usually not that they don't understand something, that they're not experienced with it. It's usually something about their actual exam skill. I have a student recently who, on the easy questions, was tending to lose lots of marks. She was just losing focus and she would just through. And we've done something like sit on your pen game. So between every single question, you have to sit on your pen, read through, point to the answer, make sure it's correct, and only then can you get your pen out and then circle it. And you have to sit back on your pen. It just slows you down a little bit. It might be that your child is struggling with not reading question words, and then you might say, okay, you have to underline at least 3 words in every question, and then you can move on. Find the gamified way to make it a little bit silly. You might say that they're just losing focus, so you can try having them get up, run and touch the wall, come back between every question, and just see what we can find, different techniques to improve their focus and figure out what the issue is. But with mock papers, there is a tendency just to sit down and try and do them over and over again. But you've got plenty of time to really work on what's going to get your child the most. Okay, that is the end of my section. We have got time for a Q&A. Before that, I'm just going to introduce my colleague Lola, who has patiently helped us with all the webinar setup today. I'm just going to bring her up to the stage and just going to have a quick chat with you about some help you can get after this session.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'd like to take a few minutes to walk you through the courses and free resources that we offer to support your child's 11 plus preparation journey. We offer a range of targeted programs designed to meet different needs. For instance, we have free taster sessions, and these are engaging and fun introductory sessions designed to ease children into the 11 plus preparation. Our next one is on Saturday, which is February the 8th, which is now currently full. But then again, I've just dropped a link into the chat. You can join the wait list to secure a spot if one becomes available. We also have 11 plus holiday intensive course. This is a 1 to 5 day program and is divided into 2 groups depending on the half-term holiday from the 17th to the 21st of February and also 24th to 28th. Also, we've got the 11 plus weekend course, and this is focused preparation for grammar and independent school exams. We have it starts on the 1st of March, 1st of March this year, and then also it's going to run for 12 weeks on Saturdays only, and it's a 3.5 hour session with brain breaks. It's going to be targeted instruction in math and English, structured lessons, and also with small groups. We've also got loads of free 11 plus resources. You can scan the QR code there to call or book a call with our specialist, and then you can have a conversation with them. If you feel like the timings you have there, you're not going to be able to make it, you can always email the contact at sevensprings.co.uk and you'll be able to get through or be able to book a session. Like I said, we have loads of free resources here, student resources, parent guides, the 11 plus familiarization test. I've also put the link in the chat for you to be able to book that, and your child you can assess their level and their preparedness for the 11 plus. Thank you everyone, and we hope you've had a wonderful time here this evening.
Thanks, Lola. Thank you so much. Off the share for that with us. Thank you. Excellent. So hopefully you've got some ideas there. The information is all in the chat as well. So do just pop in there. You can also add any more Q&A questions. I'm also going to just bring up Kerry and we'll talk through a couple of questions now. We've had some ones in from the group we've got here today. But as Lola mentioned, you have got the opportunity to book in a call with one of us as well. So Kerry, I saw someone pop this into the chat before, but let's ask this first one about how early a child can start preparing. Is year 3 too early? Is it a good time to start? What do you think about it?
My real answer is that it's never too early, and that the preparation for the 11 plus starts basically when your child starts school, because they're building skills right from when they start school that all culminate or amount to test day. So everything they're learning in maths and English is going to help them on test day. But in regards to like specific targeted 11 plus practice, year 3 is a really good place to start. We've talked a lot today about building resilience, keeping things fun, not getting burned out. That's so important, especially if you're starting early. And so we've got some free resources with some sort of fun ways to build 11 plus skills into, everyday life. Things like spotting patterns. So maybe going for a walk and looking around in nature, but then spotting the patterns and saying like, oh, I've noticed these trees are planted alternately. There's an oak tree, and then there's a chestnut tree, and then there's an oak tree, and then there's a chestnut tree. Stuff like that seems silly and irrelevant, but it's not. It's building really important skills. And Willow's provided lots of other really useful activities and games and resources in her sections today that I'd recommend.
Yeah, I would say this is a great time for you to get really familiar with your 11 plus tests and figure out how you can bring that into day-to-day life. I would not start a child looking at 11 plus tests. It's gonna just become something they start to really dislike or resent. They don't need to become familiar with the test format even. I wouldn't start that late, year 4 at the earliest, and really only introducing it very lightly. But all those kind of those skills, those pattern recognition skills, those shape awareness skills, even getting a little bit ahead in math, because we're going to have to be pushing up into year 6 math when we're only just starting the year, making sure we've got great vocabulary so that we can do the non-verbal reasoning, so we can do the verbal reasoning. I think just skills building rather than test preparation is the best use of long-term time. Once you get close to the exam, then start to bring in simplified versions of the exercises. And then later, as we're coming up to year 5, that's when we start to be doing test preparation. And by then, it should seem simple, no problem at all. I'm just going to look in the back end and just see if we've got any other questions here.
There's been another question in the chat, and actually, I think we should answer this one. I've got something to screen share to show you. So, how and where can we find suitable grammar schools nearby? Which are more academically focused than others? So I'm going to quickly show you a really useful tool, which is helpful for looking at sort of any schools really. So it's a website called, you can Google compare schools. It's called, it's a government website, School Performance Tables. And you can search by the school's name. You can search by your location, your local authority. So for example, if I put Trafford, I'm going to put somewhere more specific than that, maybe Altrincham, which is an area with several grammar schools. It's going to look at the ones nearby. I'm going to filter for secondary schools. And then you can look through, and then this is an area where I know has a lot of grammar schools, and we can see there's Loreto Grammar School here, Altrincham Grammar School for girls, Altrincham Grammar School for boys. I can click into a school. And this is where you can see all the information about the school. Now, at the minute, they all come with sort of disclaimers about the results because of COVID, when school results and pupil results weren't tracked in the same way by the government, but it's still useful to look at. So for example, I can see this school are well above average. In fact, I know this school is one of, if not the top grammar school in the country. It's definitely been in the top 3 the last few times they've done rankings. I can also see information about GCSE results. And there are things on here like Attainment 8, which might be confusing, but they tell you what that means. You can also see stuff like results by pupil characteristics. So EAL, girls versus boys, things like that. It's a really helpful website. And there is a comparison tool on it as well. You can add it to your My Schools list. And it creates a list and you can compare schools all together. So that would be my first stop. And then if you're looking at sort of which schools are more academically focused, you can normally get a really good idea of that from the website and the things that they emphasize. And also by looking at their sort of GCSE results is a good one. All grammar schools and selective schools are going to be academically focused. Some are just slightly more so than others, is what I was getting at earlier.
I think also one thing to bear in mind is that a lot of schools have the word grammar in the name that are no longer grammar schools. So just make sure when you're looking at the schools in your area, you are checking. Wikipedia is just the easiest, quickest place to check what type of school something is. So if it says it's an independent school or it's a grammar school, it will tell you right there on the very top line. I am aware we are at the end of our time, and we've got a question in really specific. So we'll quickly answer this last specific question because it's should be quite a quick one. If anyone's got any other questions though, Lola has put in a link in the chat to book in a longer talk with either Kerry and myself. This one is a really nice specific one though, about when's a good time to get a child booked in for a marked mock exam. So we're looking at year 5. Is it better to get it done early in year 5 to give more time to work on specific things? Yes, I would say put them in for a mock exam, but don't put any pressure on it. Just say we're looking for a sense of where you're at, what you're good at, and where we can really, work to help you get some skills. Kerry, would you add anything onto that?
No, that's what I'd say. I'd say if you're worrying about it, then it's better. It might be better for your sake as well, because it's not just your child that's working towards this exam. It's also you as a parent supporting them. And if it's going to help you feel more confident to know more about where they're at, then as long as it's where I said you frame it as this isn't the test. You've still got 8 months to go, or you've still got a year to go. You've got loads of time to practice. Whatever mark you get today, it's not going to be the mark you get on the real test, and it's not a real exam. It doesn't matter. As long as you frame it in that way, and it's just, this is just to find out what you know and what you don't know and what we need to practice, I think there's no harm in doing one sort of early in year 5. But yeah, just setting the expectation for your child and for yourself that if they've not been working on things like timing, or if they've not covered all of the topics yet, then not expecting top marks, and using it more as like a diagnostic tool.
Yeah, and you can find some short, quick ways to do that online. So we, for example, have a free familiarization test on our website, which just gives you a few questions in each area just to get a sense in a low pressure way. So I'm just going to ask Lola to put a link into that into the chat. It is further up in the chat as well, so if anyone wants that. But anyone who's attended today can get a free familiarization test. So that will pop up. There we go. You can book into it there, and you'll get information, and you can ask us for a more detailed chat about it as well. I'm also going to pop up on screen all of our contact details. So you can email us, you can go onto our website where we've got lots of free resources for 11+ students. We've also got a Facebook page where we regularly share information as well. So do feel free to keep in touch with us. We would love to help you on your journey. We will be running more webinars as well in future, so keep an eye out for those details. Thank you everyone who attended today, and we will hope to see you again soon. Goodbye.
Bye.